Welcome to a special edition of Citywatch, where you, our listener, can go behind the walls of City Hall. Hi, I'm your host, Bill Shimmers, and today I've got this is a special edition. We're going to talk about an important topic right now, and I have two people off to my...
Hold on, I actually only have to mute my...
Oh, well, that was a good practice run.
Take two.
Welcome to a special edition of City Watch, where you, our listener, can go behind the walls of City Hall. Hi, I'm your host, Bill Shimmers, and today I've got a topic that we need to put some information out on, and I'm thrilled. I've got Councilmember Sierra Peterson here and Fire Marshal Jeff Chapman. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Morning, thank you.
With the recent developments of one of our new codes, which I think will be very positive in the long run, I thought we would have this special edition of City Watch today, broadcasting to you, by the way, on YouTube, and we'll be going through KRS Radio as well. We're going to talk a little bit about the new building code. And Sierra, you're kind of a really important foundation to this because you actually got involved in this long before you were elected to City Hall.
Yes.
And you were part of the Neighborhood Improvement Committee.
Correct.
Can you give us a little bit of information how because this started a couple of years ago, the new building code that was just passed through council started a couple of years ago. This didn't pop up overnight.
Yes.
Albeit the COVID has made some challenging times for us in council here recently, but the whole process for this building code began 2 years ago on a committee developed by citizens of our community. Mm-hmm. Can you give us a little bit of history on that?
Yeah, back in about 2017, I recently moved back into the town of Clinton, and the neighborhood that I had moved into, I had noticed a dramatic change in the way that the housing had changed and deteriorated, and some of the things were beyond repair. So I decided took an initiative to jump in and get involved and start learning the ways that we could help change this and start being a little bit more reactive and proactive to the entire situation. During that time, I started kind of watching some of the issues throughout the neighborhood, riding around talking to some of the neighbors and what they're dealing with, and I decided that it was the best choice to bring that forward a little bit. I spoke with the police department, the fire department, learning what they're dealing with, and throughout that, I decided I'm going to start coming to council meetings.
And
when
you did.
Yes. I started to learn about the Neighborhood Improvement Committee, and I mean, 2 weeks later, I think I was involved, and we hit the ground running, and from this, we started going over it, reviewing the code, going over what it would help, what it wouldn't help, some revisions we needed to make, and through that, I met Jeff, and we just kind of spiraled from there and started going through and seeing the reaction we would get, and it turned out pretty positive. I'm glad to see that it came forward.
And I think a lot of people will be glad in the long run. Sometimes change does scare people, and I respect that. I mean, even in my own professions that I've worked, when change came about, it was a little scary, but typically it worked out well, and I see the same for the future on this. I think one of the scary parts is the financial numbers that we've spent on this without having the code that is now in place.
Yes.
Can you give us some of the numbers? And I know, Jeff, you just got some updated numbers, which almost doubled what we had.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead and tell us what some of these numbers
When I
are.
first joined the Neighborhood Improvement Committee, I had quickly learned about the budget, and in 2019, there was $200,000 or $250,000 budgeted for demolitions and nuisance abatements, lead abatements, and asbestos and whatnot. In 20, there was $300,000 budgeted. And now that elected on council, I think that it's been great to see that the housing initiative has been brought to the forefront. And now this year we have $500,000 budgeted, but that doesn't
$500,000
Yes.
just, and that's only one of the two funds.
Yes,
So-
and that doesn't even go to start to mention how much we've already spent
Yes.
in the last few years between the grass liens, the
Yes.
snow, board ups, nuisances, and et cetera. I mean, I think we're at 1.2 million at
Right.
this point, and I don't think that, I think that we need to be a little bit more proactive instead of helping people tearing them down houses. We need to help them fix them and keep them around.
I think we found that our current, well, now our old system didn't work.
Correct.
In what we budgeted for in the last 3 years is $1.2 million just to tear down homes. With this new code, we're actually moving the city forward and being a lot more proactive, which isn't that what we would all like to see?
Yes.
Jeff, you had sent me some information, and I appreciate that, by the way. We're going to let you talk a little bit here. You sent me some very interesting information here, and I think some of the cities that really people didn't think about, but 18 nearby cities, and I say nearby, definitely doesn't cover the state, but nearby, we're talking Bettendorf, DeWitt, Eldridge, Fort Dodge, who we always like to follow, and I don't like following, I'd rather be the leader, but these are all cities that already have the occupied building code in place.
Correct.
And that's, like I said, there's 18 that you gave me a list of just locally here, if you will. Tell us a little bit about this code and what, if any, changes people will really see.
You know, going back, talking about codes itself,
Yeah.
Anybody that's been in Clinton for over 10 years knows probably the history of the city of Clinton when it comes to their lack of codes. And the look on the fire side, I didn't really realize this as a young firefighter, but being the fire marshal and going in post-fire, sometime pre-fire, doing inspections, liquor license inspections and things like that. I know that's commercial buildings. We don't do a lot of inspections on private residences. And, there's people who have rights and things of that nature. And these are some of the folks that for hundreds of years, we have housing stock that's 150 years plus in some of these areas of the age of the homes. With no building codes and people able to do their own work, which they still are able to do certain things that they can do in their own homes, which is their right, as long as it meets the code. Before, there was no code there, and we're paying for that right now.
Yes.
As people are buying homes, putting additions on homes, trying to bring certain things up the code, we've taken a city, many different reasons that the demographic has changed, I'm sure of. You can't put it on one thing, but we went from the majority or 70% of owner-occupied structures that we are seeing a turn that we have a lot more rental property than we've ever had in the city of Clinton. And when you take an owner-occupied structure and you make it a rental, there's certain codes that you've had to follow, and you've had to follow them in the city of Clinton. And I will give the city credit for that. They've had a rental housing program for greater than 40 years. That there have always been rules that people have had to follow to have a rental home, to protect the tenants that are in there. So if you've taken an old home that you got an estate sale or something like that, you want to make that a rental, it has to meet a strict set of codes. We used to follow the housing quality standards, which is the same standard that the federal government followed. HUD would do almost the same exact inspection that we would do, following them standards.
So if they weren't found out by us, they were going to be found out by the federal government anyways to meet the
correct.
standards.
The reason that we followed that is because the city of Clinton had no code standard.
Right.
They latched on to something that the federal government already did because we didn't have our own code standard. We did not adopt any of the codes. And at the time, there were a couple different code families out there. Most of the time now in the United States, you see the international code family,
Right.
A standard of codes. So, we did get them codes. 2008 it began with the life safety code and the fire code. And then it spawned from there. Then in 2014, we went to the 2014 code. We finally got the 2009 or the 12 code is what we did. And we finally went to a code set. And we know we like to get a foot in the door to have and people use that terminology, get a foot in the door and we can work on our codes and get them up to where they need to be. But I think a mistake that we made then was to not adopt the entire code set. And when you look at that code set, it starts out with the international building, the international residential, the international fire. People are mostly understand them codes. Then you throw in the National Electric Code, which is NFPA 70. You throw in the Uniform Plumbing Code because somewhere along the line, the state of Iowa went the Uniform Plumbing Code. And the city said, wow, we might well adopt that instead of the international. A little bit of changes to them, but they run side by side most of the time. But we've left a few things out. We have the International Mechanical Code, the International Fuel Gas Code. We have the codes to make your house energy efficient, the green code and all these different things.
So we're nowhere near what you're telling me what we could be at.
Well, we could have went deeper by adopting
Right.
the entire set. We left out a couple of things. We left out the historical code, the existing building code, and we left out the International Property Maintenance Code. Now, by saying that, and I've had people approach me, well, what's different on this? The code, we already have the ability to do that. Really, we don't, because in the code set, it does have sections in the International Residential Code that would reflect back that you need to reference the existing building code, or you need to reference the property maintenance code, you need to reference the historical code. Well, if we don't have them codes, how do you reference
Right.
back to them to do that? So back in 2000, I went to the building department in 2013 and scared to death. Understand the job as the fire department I did for years and love that job, to say, man, I'm being thrown into something that I'm seeing the other side of this, the prior to the fire type thing. And when you get in there and start looking at these codes and learning, you're agape to what we lack in the city of Clinton. About a year and a half later, we had a reality check that hit us, that all of a sudden we're seeing to me, I call it a subculture, underground movement that we call slang terms, the backpack group. Some people in town call it zombie land. They have all kinds of slangs for this, that when you're seeing, adults 30, 35 years old riding kids' bikes through towns with backpacks on, you think, where's this at? Then all of a sudden we find out, man, we have a bunch of empty properties. We're starting to find people squatting in these properties, starting to find people due to some reason that they can't afford to have their electric, they can't afford to have their water. And we start to get an uptick of these calls. What are you going to do for us? We shouldn't have to pay and live next to it. We pay our taxes. What can you do to help us out? These people shouldn't be able to live there. There's no water. There's no electricity. It's a danger. You got these people traffic all night long. What can you do? And we found out real quick that we didn't have the codes in place on owner-occupied structures to do a lot for that.
And you bring up, and I'm going to throw it back at you, Sierra, because you got to experience this, and as a council member, you got to receive some of the phone calls because of a neighbor of yours having that same exact thing.
Yes.
Can you help enlighten us? Because I know people were getting frustrated because Jeff couldn't do his job, or the police couldn't do their job because we had nothing in place to put
Yes.
to get these guys in place. You know what I'm trying to tell
Yes.
you here. Enlighten us onto that, because you had some frustrated.
One of the most unfortunate things I've ever had to do is tell a neighbor, an 85-year-old neighbor, that there wasn't anything we could do for this home that had, criminal activity running through it. I'm sure there was theft and whatnot. We couldn't do anything because the person that lived there was the owner of the home. It was very hard for me to tell this 85-year-old woman that they're not doing anything against what the city allows them to do. And to see her broken and say that she's going to put her house up for sale broke my heart to see that. And it's for sale right now. That's very unfortunate for me to see. And I truly think that if she had a better peace of mind and we had the backing as the city to help our community and constituents like that, she would have stayed. That was the house she raised her kids. Her grandkids are still living there with her. It was a really hard situation to deal with, and that's more than once. There are people that have had the fire department called for asphyxiation because they have a generator running in the basement and there's no ventilation, and we've had near deaths on multiple occasions in that exact situation.
And those are life safety issues. This is far beyond the chipped paint and and shingles.
On the contrary of that, on the house on the opposite side of this one, the foundation crushed in, and there were people living in that home. That was a very scary day, I'm sure, for the fire department to have to go in there and try to clear the house out and make sure nobody else was stuck in there. These are things that we shouldn't have to tell people to take care of.
Right.
But unfortunately, that's where we've come to.
Right.
Is you have to be responsible for your home.
Right.
To add to that, around that same time frame that Ms. Peterson's talking about, one of the very first ones I dealt with, and it's very frustrating for the neighbors to look them in the face and say, I'm doing everything we can. I know you are, but we need to do more. And to try to dig in what that more is. And it really didn't come to light on what that more could be until we went to the League of Cities. They put on a seminar out in Ames, probably back in 2016, 15 or 16. And they asked this room full of people all around the state of Iowa to do the same jobs. That were city employees that did nuisance in building and housing. And they had us, do one of them things, you stand up. Hey, stand up if you have this code set. Most people stood up. Now, stand up if you guys are proactive and you're doing this or you're doing this. Some people stay standing if you have the International Property Maintenance Code. And, about a third of the room sat down. It's like, okay, kudos to you guys that are still standing, but the rest of you, how do you do your job? How do you do your job in this situation without having guidance from a code that gives you the roadmap to do what you're supposed to do? And it hit me the same thing as her, and not seeing this side of it. I grew up in this town my entire life, and know that there are people that were better off than some than others. And some of us grew up on one side of the tracks, and there's other people on the other side of the tracks. You always hear that.
Sure.
But the day that we finally had enough with one of the neighbors, and we had some issues, that I teamed up with the police department. Bill Greenwald's a good friend of mine, grew up together. He's the deputy chief there. And we went to a house I was having troubles with. We were going to go in and do an inspection. Sent them the letters. They didn't go in. They could tell me no. I would have went and got an admin warrant. This is how bad it had gotten there from the complaints that we had. Numbers, complaints. When they say the city, I called 150 times and nobody would do anything. It was one of them types of calls to where they got people's attention. No, here's our records. That's what we're trying to do. Finally, to the point we're going there. We go in there. They let us in. Didn't have to get a warrant. And we put 15 people out of
Wow.
a 2-bedroom home with no electricity, no water, no anything. They ripped the pipes out for scrap.
The copper.
They were defecating and urinating in the tub. 15 people that we cleared out, on top of how many cats and dogs. And it
I've lost
broke my
track.
heart because the girl that lived there, she legitimately lived there. She owned the place. Giant tears is like, you don't have to live like this. And we tried to get help. Let's get you some help. Let's get you turned back on. Let's get you doing things the right way. It didn't work out for whatever reason. On her side, it didn't work out for her. And the house is now, it's still there, but I think it's on her demo list. Or
I'm
it
not
might have been
sure.
sold.
I'm not
But
sure yet.
That was the first one that I dealt with like that. To where, oh my goodness, the people keep coming out. There's 15 people. And as we sat in this place, there's 7, 8, 9 more that see us and turn around and go the other way on their bikes with their backpacks, and away they go. Well, this started, now we're keyed into something, and this goes back to that other fund. You talk about $500,000 in demo. We didn't start knowing about these places until we got complaints from the neighbors that, guess what, the grass is 2 feet tall.
And we pay for that.
Wow. So we go out, and that's how it started. When you saw grass get tall, that was the beginning of the end, because now you're looking, oh, this place is empty. They left in the dead of night, whatever. No, they just moved away and nobody's here. And they walked away from these things.
Can
Now
I
we
chime
start.
in quick?
Yeah, go
On
ahead.
that grass lien, we are averaging $65,000 a year
A
for
summer.
the last 2 years. For a summer, and that's only a few months. For the last 2 years on homes that fall underneath these situations. There are others, but a lot of them do fall underneath these situations. And the home that Jeff is speaking on actually has a personal touch to me. My brother-in-law actually was part of this situation, and he was involved in a lot of this, and he's actually begged for help himself into that. And rest his soul, he is no longer with us, but he actually was living in this home. So when you see it on a personal level, and you want these people, certain ones do want that help, and they don't want to live like this, but that's what they're chose to do. We got to do something.
Well, and we're going to talk, our next show, we're going to talk about some of the things that will help the neighborhoods. And I know you've been a very good advocate for that and assisted on that. But, we talk about the $1.2 million in 3 years. And this is what we're budgeting for as a council. We're actually on track to do $5 million over the next decade budgeting of citizens' money to tear down homes. But Jeff, you've actually we've gone beyond that, which you kind of enlighten us as well.
So a little bit back to that history back
Right.
from 13 and beyond. When I went over to City Hall, you can trial by fire. Coming from the bubble of the fire department over to City Hall, you learn, your eyes get open really quickly to know that there's a special assessment fund that's out there. Because okay, we get these funds, how do we pay our contractors, where does this come from? And when I first went over there, that special assessment fund was around $200,000 negative. Minus $200,000. It's like, wow, how do we do this? Well, we're up to negative $435,000 in that fund. And that's anything we pay a contractor to come out and take care of somebody else's property, whether it's snow removal, grass removal at $65,000 a season, boarding up a house that squatters have gotten into, tearing down garages, or by all means demoing a house that we have to demo, until you guys had budgeted it. Some of these were emergency type things. If the house is falling down, that would go into that fund, and it continues to grow.
So realistically, we're looking close to $1 million this next year.
And the thing is,
So-
it's a washing machine. To put history back to this,
Yeah.
it didn't take very long in 2014 to understand we had an issue. To start pushing, why don't we have this International Property Maintenance Code is when it first started to come up. It's been before the council. I've said it many times in front. I think I've prayed in front of the city council at least a dozen times on this topic, to finally have people that are willing to listen to it, and then by all means run through 3 readings and have talks about it, and to have this thing passed is a pretty good victory. And what I mean by that, it allows the people that these taxpayers that pay their wages to make their neighborhoods safer, cleaner, cleaned up, that gives them the tools to be able to do the entire spectrum. It isn't a Band-Aid. It's not a fix-all. It's a Band-Aid, not a fix-all. We have to put all these things together, have everybody going in the canoe paddling the right way in order to change that.
So where do we go from here? Now that we've got the code, what happens tomorrow? Where's our code taking us?
I can answer that. What my vision would be for this,
Yeah.
and we talked about this before, and it's some contentious with certain folks, and I understand that. A couple things to think about. It's not the end of the world. The sky's not falling. We're not coming beating on your doors to come in and say, let me look at the tile in your bathroom. Let me look. We're not doing any of that. This isn't for that. This is literally to take care of certain things that we couldn't take care of before. If we get a place that's owner occupied, that doesn't have running water, that doesn't have electrical, that doesn't have these things, we don't just throw you out and say we're tearing your house down. Our first goal is to get you a letter sent to say, how can we help you? What continues to ring over and over and over with me, and I've had this, I bet 50 different people ask, why is there always something TIF-wise for these folks, but I've lived here my whole life and there's no help for me, right? I mean, we have certain things. I put more people into the ECIA grants at $24,999. I think there's some pictures posted that are befores and afters that they're tickled pink about this. If we could get something, my vision would be that we can turn this money around right here
Yes.
and start giving this to people on low or no interest to help them improve their own home. It spreads. It's just like the broken window system
Correct.
goes the other way. When you get one person at the end of the block that fixes theirs up, and 7th Avenue South and 6th Street was one of the worst houses in town. And a couple went in there with no help from the city, and that is now one of the nicest houses in that entire spectrum until you get down to about 800 block. It's a beautiful home. They got no help. We used to put these folks out there and say, hey, way to go, let's give you an award. And then they've worried about the tax person. So how do we juggle this thing to say, how can we assist you to,
Right.
because of what it does, it's win-win. Right now
Right.
it's lose-lose for the city. There's no incentive for the city to go to your house, put you out of it and do this, because it costs the city money in many
Yes.
different ways. You heard about the grass. It's on average what we used to have for a single-family home is around $1,500 a year that sits empty for the city to pay for grass removal, snow removal, boarding it up when people break in, and then at the end, another $10,000 to $12,000 to tear it down. And at the same time, what aren't we getting? We're not getting tax money on that. Why? It doesn't benefit us.
Well, and we sell it for $250.
Or 300
or
or
300.
Averagely, we're probably looking at 20,000 to 25,000 a house.
Per
to
property,
remove,
yeah.
Take care of, and demolition, the asbestos.
I think the goal would be to, instead of tearing them down, put money back into them,
Yes.
which increases the tax base, which instead of dropping values around it, now stabilizes them housing values,
Or increases it.
which helps the city on the other side and the taxpayer, because anytime you know you can lower a TIF, it helps that taxpayer out.
Right.
We hear that all the time. That's my vision. My vision is to be able to come in here and be able to raise them property values up, because it helps everybody across the board.
Right. And it would help, it even helps raise the value of the homes down the street. So there is a benefit far above tearing down a home, selling it for pennies on a dollar. We're actually raising the value of the home down the street. So there is a benefit to the taxpayer down the street, not just the person living in that home.
I think too many times we talked about social media earlier.
Yeah, we talked about it a little.
Positive, negatives, whatever, and there's too many times we watch too much television. Like I work in a world that when you go to an ambulance call, right, They expect two brain surgeons and a NASCAR driver and an ambulance to get you, right? You know,
Right.
because we watch these shows and they figure these things out in a half-an-hour program to understand that that's the same thing that we have here. The city of Clinton isn't putting this in, sneaking it in, doing a underhanded thing so we can bulldoze a whole section of town to build some big casino or something. We're trying to rob folks. That's not happening here.
We're trying to keep people in their
Trying to
homes.
stabilize,
Yeah.
you know, basically we're shoring up what's broke.
Yeah,
This isn't an overnight process.
Right.
It took many years to get to where we're at. I would like to see that we have a 5-year and we have a 10-year plan and we benchmark that to see how we're doing that. Whether we look at, we start out with 400 empty homes and we're down to this, we've tore this many down, we've rehabbed this many, to say, oh man, this program may work. And we'll see. We just got a new one done. Is it sold yet? Anybody know if it's sold?
Yes,
There you go.
There you go.
916 South Fifth Street
Boom.
has sold.
A beautiful house.
It is a
This
beautiful
one is
home.
moving from Iowa City to here, actually, which could lead me into some of the grant opportunities that we have currently available. I don't know if you have any more questions.
We're going to talk about that in our next segment. But yeah, let's wrap this one up here because this is our special edition, and we're going to get back on track with our regular ones. Jeff, in the last couple minutes, if people want to learn more, not over Facebook, but if they really want to learn more about what's coming up, what is the code about, instead of speculating, who do they call? Who would they,
I would ask them to go onto the City of Clinton's website.
Okay.
www.cityclintonowa.us. Hit the links for the fire department. For myself personally, you can call 563-244-3360, which is the building department, and we would be glad to talk to anybody, answer any questions that you might have, give you the information that we have, educate you on any of them things. And on a quick note on that, I don't do this anymore like I used to.
It's
In
not the
order
Jeff
for-
Chapman code, by the way.
In order for this to get to me, it has to be really, really bad. So I want to put that out there that, you know, it's not like, oh, you got a fire code violation. I even saw something out there that somebody put on, I don't want to spin this too much, but they're forcing carbon monoxide and smoke detection down our throat, the city of Clinton. The folks don't realize that came from the state of Iowa. We
Yeah.
have no choice in
Right.
this. Why would you argue something that's going to save your life? I don't know. But this is set by the state of Iowa. None of us have a choice. Every home has to have smoke detection.
We're keeping up with everybody
Every
else.
home has to have carbon monoxide detection. There's no grandfathering in on it. And then we have the contention of hardwired versus non-hardwired. We've actually taken steps to use technology on the complaint that I saw that we can't tear this 150-year-old. Good, there's technology out
Right.
there that states you can.
Right.
This is what you have to follow. We didn't create that,
Right.
but we have to follow that and uphold that. And that, unfortunately, or fortunately, is my job
Right.
to be able to hold that side of it up.
And we've already had examples of that being deadly
Oh, yeah.
in our community.
More and more
so,
and more, over and over.
how do you, I used to say, how do you measure success? Is it one death at a time, or you know what I'm saying? How do you put a number or value on people's safety? And
Just a little plug here at the end.
yes, give us a plug.
In the city of Clinton, Iowa, for anybody in the city of Clinton, Iowa to say, I don't have a smoke detector is the most preposterous thing I've ever heard. I've been there for 26 years. There's been a smoke detector program in place for longer than I've been there. We expanded it after the Dunham Street fire. It's been 10 years ago, 10 and a half now to be specific, when we lost a family, a couple little kids, grandma, mom, to a house fire in Dunham. Since that time, with participation and partnership from the school PTA, several citizens in the city of Clinton, local loaning establishments, that we started a program, we revamped our program to give every household a smoke detector. Every single household. If you don't have a smoke detector, please, by all means, call the fire department. We haven't expanded the carbon monoxide yet, but it's in the process of us looking how we can do that to assist folks on that side of it also. But please call the fire department if you don't have a smoke detector. They're that important.
Well, Jeff, I appreciate you spent a lot of time out here with us this morning. I appreciate it. Sarah, any last words of wisdom before we close on this session today?
I just think that a lot of people need to keep in mind that we have had and been forced to be reactive to the current housing situation, and this is just one way for us to become proactive and actually spend the taxpayer dollars in the way that they should be spent, rather than tearing down houses that people neglect.
Well, and we've had emails on that too. All we're doing is throwing money at tearing down homes, and I think for the first time, we're looking at a positive change. So, thank you both again, and And thank for all of our listeners, and thank our audience, the mayor who's been sitting out there making sure we're doing everything right here. Until next time.